Well, the Indian government has vowed to punish those responsible for the Kashmir attack that killed at least 26 people. At a public rally in Bihar, Prime Minister Narendra Modi declared India will pursue the terrorists and their backers to the ends of the earth.
Terrorism will not go unpunished. Every effort will be made to ensure that justice is done.
And for more, we are joined by the Director of the Center for Muslim States and Societies at the University of UWA, Professor Samina Yasmeen. Professor, welcome to the program. Now, tensions between India and Pakistan have been strained for some time, but how bad are things now that India has effectively shut the border to Pakistan, or one of the borders to Pakistan?
I think they're tense at the moment, but it's not something very new, because if you look at the history since 1947, there have been lots of times when the tension increased and there were steps taken like this. But where it's different at this moment is that 26 tourists were killed by terrorists, and Indian government has decided that it's Pakistani-supported terrorists who have done that. And they've taken all these steps which communicate to Pakistan that India is going to be tough. Now, the argument that they have presented is that the resistance force is actually supported by Pakistan. And in that, the number of decisions that they have taken, some of them are very similar to the ones they have taken in the past. Where it's different is that they've also said that they would hold the Indus Water Treaty that determines the division of waters between India and Pakistan in abeyance. Now, that's a very serious decision, because according to the agreement that the two countries had signed, it couldn't be terminated or held in abeyance. But the fact that India is actually threatening that they won't let Pakistan have access to water means that they're taking a very strong stand. And that's where I think the tension is increasing. Pakistan government has also responded, and they have said, we'll close our airspace. Again, it's not something new. It's happened in the past. But what they have said is that, like India, they would also hold agreements in abeyance, including the Simla Agreement, which was signed in 1972. And it said that the two sides could stick to their views on the Kashmir issue or other issues, but they would resolve it bilaterally. So for Pakistan to say we would hold that in abeyance as well is basically their message to India that if India can be tough, so can Pakistan. And that's where the possibility of increased tension starts coming up.
Would either side consider, each other's retaliatory measures as acts of war?
I think there's a possibility, but depends on how those retaliatory attacks take place. Because again, if you go only a few years back, there was a similar scenario, not the terrorists not killing lots of people in the public space. And the Indian government tried to threaten Pakistan. Pakistan responded. And after that, there was a controlled sort of situation. So it is possible, mainly because both India and Pakistan are nuclear states. And even though both sides have this idea that they can control that, they're also aware that at some stage, engaging in conventional conflict using missiles or anything else does not necessarily limit the conflict to that level. So while there would be some retaliations, my assessment is that they won't go beyond a certain level where it gets into a full-blown conflict. Because I think Pakistan can afford it. Pakistan is in a very difficult situation, so that wouldn't be their preference. But I would say that even India can't afford it, because with India's economic growth at the moment and push to improve links with the regional countries, especially in the Gulf, they couldn't be seen to be responding to something that they have come up with as an allegation by attacking Pakistan. There could be incursions in the Pakistani part of Kashmir, but we will still have to see how it goes.
So if this is detrimental to both sides, then conversely, do you think, I'm just wondering as well at the moment, would this actually have the effect of maybe drawing both governments together and finally get to the table and hold talks either bilaterally or through a mediator some way?
It depends on how the two sides play the game, because if we look at the history of Indo-Pakistan relationship, when there have been conflicts or even war, sometimes they've given in to third-party mediation, for example, in 1965. At other times, they have themselves come in and talked to each other. And still at other times, they have sort of taken a very strong stand. And then somebody from the background, especially the United States, has asked them to cool it. Where the situation is different at this time is that now the world doesn't look at South Asia as consisting of India and Pakistan in relative equivalent terms. India has become a lot stronger, economically stronger, globally more recognized. Pakistan isn't in the same position. In fact, it's economically very weak. So therefore, it is quite possible that even when external countries, excluding China, get involved in trying to calm the two sides, they may not give the same attention to Pakistan's concerns as they would to the Indian. So we'll have to see how it goes, but it could go either way.
Yes, and for now, though, Professor Yasmeen, India, previously and in this instance has pointed the finger at the Pakistani state for, supporting militant groups that may have links to these attackers in Kashmir. Are those accusations justified in your view?
In my view, Pakistan government, including the military, has really toned down its support for militants. Because if we look at the 1990s and even first decade of the 2000s, there was a very clear effort on Pakistan government's part to use these groups for militant purposes or for what they said for jihadi purposes. But after a while, I think even the Pakistani government realized, especially what's happened in, say, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and also Balochistan, that if you constantly promote jihadi groups, you can actually be a target yourself at some stage. So the Pakistani government's position has changed, but it still doesn't mean that there aren't some groups that are either taking it on their own or have got some support, maybe not necessarily from the top brass in the government, but somewhere. So whether it's really the Pakistani supported groups, Indian government is claiming that. Pakistani side, not just government, but even social media is saying that it's an allegation that hasn't really been supported. And they're arguing that maybe the two sides could even go for independent verification to make sure that Indian allegations are valid. So I guess my position is that I would say that it's probably less possible now than it was 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. But in the world of world politics, you really can't ever exclude such possibilities.
Yes, and just finally, on that point, these groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Taiba is classified as a terrorist organization, even here by the Australian government. So the question is, if they are softening their stance on that, the question is, why isn't Pakistan able to counter groups like that, or do they have the will to want to do that?
Okay, groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, especially, which later on became Jamaat-ud-Dawa, the government supported them in the past. But my reading of the work that I've done on these groups is basically that there came a time when these groups became dominant in their own right. So even though the government changes its position and may have a different options or different preferences, there's still people at the ground level who have loyalties or ideas that they could put in practice. So even with their best of efforts, the government cannot control religiously motivated groups. And so to say that Pakistan government has to control Lashkar-e-Taiba, it can, but there are limits to it, because part of the society has become entangled in these ideas. And I guess it's the same situation even in case of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and Baloch Liberation army, then once the process starts, then the ability of the government to do something becomes very limited.
Okay, Professor Samina, Yasmeen, always appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.